They called her primitive. They feared her because she was small and human. They trembled when the Cathara spoke. Then Dr. Elena Vasquez cured the incurable, and overnight, the galaxy's apex predators fell in line at her feet. The coffee synthesizer aboard the Curiosity spit out another cup of what Elena generously called sludge. She wrinkled her nose at the burnt smell and sighed, taking a reluctant sip anyway. 3 degrees in xenobiology, and she couldn't even get a decent cup of coffee on a Terran research vessel. "Better than nothing," she muttered, returning to her microscope. The bacterial culture from Gevin Prime's western continent had developed fascinating structures overnight, almost like neural pathways. Elena adjusted the magnification, squinting through the eyepiece. "Are you moving toward the air vent?" The microbes did indeed appear to be migrating in a coordinated pattern toward the lab's ventilation system. She made a quick note in her digital log. Possible collective behavior in sample G742. Migration pattern suggests rudimentary intelligence, or at least tropism toward oxygen-rich environments. Containment protocols upgraded to level 3. Her assistant should have been here hours ago. The Terran Science Council would want a full report by tomorrow, and she still had 16 samples to catalog from the sulfur springs. Elena stretched, her back cracking after hours, hunched over the microscope. The lab door hissed open, but instead of her assistant, the ship's communications officer poked his head in. "Dr. Vasquez, you might want to see this." Elena raised an eyebrow, not looking up from her microscope. "Unless it's a new coffee synthesizer or my assistant with those extremophile samples. I'm busy." "It's a Cathara tribute broadcast. They're rerouting the Andrix trade fleet again." Despite herself, Elena glanced at the wall screen where the officer had pulled up the transmission. A solemn Velti diplomat was announcing adjusted shipping lanes for the next 6 standard months. All vessels were to avoid the Cathara hunting grounds in the Tannhauser sector, and the scheduled mineral shipments from the Gorch mining colonies would be diverted to Cathara territory as tribute. 17 star systems, Elena murmured. Over 300 sentient species, and we're all still cowering before overgrown lizards. The communications officer shrugged. 3-meter tall, 4 armed overgrown lizards with teleportation technology and enough firepower to glass a continent. The Velti Confederacy tried standing up to them a century ago. Lost 3 colony worlds in a week. Elena turned back to her microscope. And now, we pay protection money like it's the cosmic mafia. Fascinating, but irrelevant to my cultures. Unless the Cathara have suddenly developed an interest in extremophile bacteria, I need to... The ship's alarms blared, cutting her off. Red emergency lights flashed across the laboratory ceiling. "Unauthorized teleportation detected in Corridor B," the ship's AI announced with infuriating calm. "Security protocols activated." Elena's hand froze on the microscope's focus knob. Corridor B was directly outside her laboratory. "You were saying?" the communications officer whispered, face pale. "Something about the Cathara not being interested in—" The laboratory door slid open. 3 colossal figures ducked through the human-sized entrance. Their scaled bodies gleamed under the emergency lights, iridescent green and gold patterns stretching across muscular torsos. 4 massive arms, each ending in curved talons, hung at their sides. The lead Cathara scales bore elaborate scarification patterns, ritual marks that designated a pack elder. Elena sighed heavily, shutting down her microscope. "Really? Now?" She stood and faced the intruders, arms crossed. "I'm in the middle of time-sensitive research." The pack elder's 4 yellow eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. Its translator module activated with a soft beep. "You will accompany us," it growled, the translation struggling to convey the appropriate menace. The communications officer had pressed himself against the far wall, trembling. Elena, however, merely looked annoyed. "Let me guess, evaluated, ignored, or added to your tribute." She began methodically shutting down her equipment. "Do you have paperwork, at least?" Forms I can fill out to ensure my cultures are maintained in my absence? The Cathara exchanged glances, clearly puzzled by her reaction. Fear was the expected response. Groveling, perhaps. Not irritated compliance. Bring only what you require for your function, the leader commanded. Elena grabbed her portable diagnostic kit from the supply cabinet. Fine, but I'm logging a formal complaint with the Terran Science Council. She emptied the contents of a small refrigeration unit into the case, adding several sealed vials and a digital tablet. She scrawled a quick note on the lab terminal. Kidnapped by Cathara. Feed culture G742. Watch for ventilation escape attempts. Will contact if possible. EV. Let's go, she said, marching past the towering predators. I assume you have a ship dock somewhere? Or are we using that teleportation module strapped to your arm? The guards flanked her, bewilderment evident in their posture. One leaned toward the pack elder and rumbled something in their native tongue. The human does not display appropriate fear. The translator rendered in stilted English. Elena rolled her eyes. I've spent the last 5 years studying microorganisms that can survive in boiling acid and cosmic radiation. You're just big lizards with fancy guns. The pack elder's talons flexed, a gesture that had caused planetary governors to faint. You will learn respect. And you'll learn that my bacterial cultures won't catalog themselves. Elena stepped onto the teleportation pad without waiting for instructions. So let's get this over with, shall we? The last thing she saw before the Cathara ship's teleportation beam enveloped her was the stunned expression on the communications officer's face. She managed a quick, sarcastic wave before reality dissolved around her. The interior of the Cathara vessel was exactly what Elena expected. Dark corridors with ominous red lighting, sharp, brutalist angles in the architecture, and an overwhelming sense of dread engineered into every surface. Atmospheric mood lighting, she commented, as the guards led her down a corridor. Very on-brand. She noted with professional interest the various bacterial colonies growing in the ventilation shafts. 3 distinct types, if she wasn't mistaken. One produced the faint blue bioluminescence that supplemented the dim lighting. You might want to clean these vents, she told the nearest guard, pointing to a particularly robust growth. That strain looks like it might be consuming your air filtration components. The guard growled something that the translator didn't bother to render. Elena continued her running assessment as they moved deeper into the ship. Your water recycling system is leaking condensation at every junction. That's a breeding ground for pathogenic organisms. She tapped a dripping pipe. And your docking clamps use hydraulics instead of magnetic locks? Very retro. By the time they reached what appeared to be a command center, the Cathara guards were exchanging confused glances. Elena caught snippets of their untranslated conversation. Limited knowledge of their language, suggesting they were debating whether capturing her had been a bureaucratic mistake. A massive view screen dominated the forward wall, showing a small research station orbiting a gas giant. Elena recognized it as one of the Cathara's remote outposts, rarely seen by non-Cathara species. That's where we're going, I take it. What exactly do you need me for? Elena asked. The pack elder turned its massive head. You will see. Hours later, they docked at the research station. Elena was escorted through more dimly lit corridors, these even more poorly maintained than the ship. The air held a distinctive smell mold, certainly, but also something medicinal and bitter. They entered what could only be described as an interrogation chamber. The room was dank, with walls that seemed to weep moisture. Restraining chairs that looked designed by someone who hated both comfort and function lined one wall. In the center lay a large slab, and on it, an enormous Cathara. This one dwarfed even the pack elder. Its scales, which should have gleamed with iridescent colors, were dull and lifeless. Thick, yellowish pus seeped from wounds across its torso. Its breathing was labored, coming in ragged gasps. Behold the mighty star, felled by a curse, the pack elder intoned, gesturing toward the prone figure. Around the slab, several Cathara in elaborate ceremonial garb performed a rhythmic swaying motion, emitting low, rumbling chants. They waved burning herbs, the smoke creating elaborate patterns above the wounded leader. Pack leader of the 7th Collective, the elder continued, conqueror of the Rigel Expanse, terror of the outer colonies. Elena approached the slab, her xenobiologist's eye immediately assessing the symptoms. "This isn't a curse," she said, pulling on surgical gloves from her kit. "It's a systemic infection. Probably started as a localized wound that wasn't properly cleaned." The chanting Cathara healers stopped abruptly. One stepped forward, brandishing a ceremonial dagger. "You will not touch him," the healer growled. "The ancient spirits have turned against him. Only the rites of cleansing can restore his strength." Elena ignored the dagger, leaning closer to examine the suppurating wounds. "He's septic. The infection has spread throughout his bloodstream." She turned to the pack elder. "Give me samples or he dies. Your choice." The room fell silent. Even the labored breathing of Star seemed to pause for a moment. "You dare threaten the life of our pack leader," the healer snarled. "I'm not threatening anything," Elena replied calmly. "Biology is. His immune system is overwhelmed. Without intervention, septic shock will set in within hours, followed by multiple organ failure." She opened her diagnostic kit. "Now, let me do my job or prepare your succession rituals." The pack elder and healers conferred in rapid, hissing Cathara. Elena caught phrases like desecration and heresy, but also last hope and nothing to lose. Finally, the elder nodded. "Proceed, human, but know that if he dies under your care, you will follow him to the void." "Fair enough," Elena said, already preparing a sample slide. "I'll need clean water, sterilized instruments if you have any, and everyone who isn't assisting me needs to step back." The healers reluctantly withdrew, still clutching their ceremonial implements. Elena worked quickly, taking tissue samples and preparing slides. She placed one under her portable microscope and adjusted the focus. "Just as I thought. Streptococcus-like bacteria. Probably a novel strain." She glanced up at the pack elder. "This could have been prevented with basic wound care and sterilization. Don't you have medical protocols?" The elder's scales rippled in what might have been embarrassment. "The Cathara do not succumb to tiny creatures. Our genetics are superior, our willpower unmatched." "Tell that to the bacteria," Elena muttered, mixing a solution in a vial. "I'm going to administer a broad-spectrum antibiotic from my kit. It's formulated for multi-species use, but I'll need to monitor for adverse reactions." As she prepared the injection, Star's 4 eyes flickered open. They were clouded with pain, but still burned with intelligence. His massive head turned slightly, focusing on the small human with her vials and instruments. "Who defies the curse?" he rasped, each word clearly causing pain. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist from the Terran research vessel Curiosity," she replied, swabbing a patch of scales with disinfectant. "And it's not a curse. It's a bacterial infection. Now hold still. This might sting." 6 hours later, Star's fever had broken. The pustulant discharge from his wounds had slowed, and his breathing had become more regular. Elena had improvised a saline drip using her portable equipment, adding a second dose of antibiotics and anti-inflammatory compounds. The Cathara healers watched in stunned silence as she worked, periodically checking her samples under the microscope and adjusting her treatments. She had commandeered their ceremonial washing basin, sterilized it with a solution from her kit, and was now using it to clean Star's wounds. "Your ritual purification herbs," she said to one of the healers. "Do they have antibacterial properties?" The healers stared at her blankly. "Never mind," Elena sighed. "Magical thinking. Let me rephrase. When you burn these plants, do wounds heal faster afterward?" The healer seemed marginally less confused. The sacred flora of Kithar cleanses the spirit pathways and drives out malevolent entities. Right, Elena nodded. Bring me some unburnt. When the herbs arrived, she crushed a few leaves and examined them under her microscope. Interesting. There are compounds here similar to Earth's tea tree oil, mildly antibacterial. She prepared a poultice. We'll integrate this with my treatment. Cultural continuity is important for psychological healing. One of the guards leaned toward another, talons flexing nervously. She speaks of spirits and medicine as one. Primitive wisdom, the other responded. Perhaps the legends of Earth healers are true. 12 hours after beginning treatment, Star's wounds were showing healthy granulation. The infection was clearly receding. Elena had worked through the night, monitoring vital signs and adjusting medications. She'd instructed the healers in basic aseptic technique, though their compliance was grudging at best. Your pack leader will recover, she announced to the assembled Kithara. But he needs continued care, clean dressings, regular doses of the antibiotics I've prepared, and absolutely no ceremonial combat or hunting for at least 2 standard weeks. The pack elder's scales rippled with what might have been relief. The curse is lifted then. Elena rubbed her temples. It was never a curse. It was Streptococcus cathare. I'm naming it that provisionally. A bacterial strain that's evolved to exploit weaknesses in Kithara physiology. She pointed to her microscope. Look for yourself. These are the evil spirits that nearly killed your leader. The elder approached cautiously, peering through the eyepiece with one massive eye. He straightened abruptly, his posture rigid with shock. Tiny things? These defeated Zdar? Impossible. Entirely possible, Elena countered. The universe doesn't care how many worlds you've conquered or how sharp your claws are. Bacteria have been perfecting their survival strategies for billions of years. They'll be here long after both our species are gone. 24 hours after Elena had begun treatment, Star fully regained consciousness. He pushed himself up on his lower set of arms, his upper limbs flexing experimentally. Food, he rumbled. Bring rations. The assembled healers and guards gasped. According to their traditions, the wasting curse was incurable. Once it took hold, death was inevitable. Yet here was their pack leader, demanding food with his characteristic imperiousness. When Star had eaten and regained some strength, he fixed his 4 eyes on Elena. You saved me, human. Explain. Elena, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion and was dozing in a corner, jerked awake. What? Oh, yes. She straightened her rumpled lab coat. Bacterial infection, antibiotics, proper wound care, basic medicine. Really? Our healers called it a curse beyond treatment. They performed the sacred rites for 7 cycles. Well, your healers need remedial microbiology. Elena stretched, her back cracking. Sterilize your instruments. Wash your hands. Keep wounds clean. Medicine isn't magic. Star's scales rippled in what might have been amusement, possibly embarrassment. You speak with unusual directness, Dr. Elena Vasquez. I've been awake for 36 hours treating a 3-meter apex predator with medieval medical practices. Directness is all I have left. The pack elder approached, head slightly bowed in what appeared to be deference. The human healer has performed a miracle. The curse that no Kithara has ever survived has been vanquished. Elena groaned. Not a miracle. Science, empirical observation, trial and error, millennia of accumulated human medical knowledge. She jabbed a finger at the microscope. Look at the evidence. Those bacteria are real. They're not spirits or curses. But the Kithara were already spreading the word. Healers rushed to communication consoles, transmitting the news across their territories. Guards spoke in hushed tones about the primitive with power over curses. The pack elder issued formal proclamations about the human who commands the invisible world. Elena watched in growing dismay as her straightforward medical intervention transformed into legend before her eyes. "This is not going to end well," she muttered. She was right, though not in the way she expected. Within days, the research facility was overwhelmed with Cathara from across their territories. Pack leaders, sub-commanders, even advisors to the Cathara Emperor lined up outside Elena's makeshift clinic. All bore similar infections, far more advanced than Zdar's had been. "How does an entire species neglect basic hygiene?" Elena demanded, as she treated her 20th patient, a scarred veteran whose upper right arm was nearly gangrenous. "Half of you never sterilize anything. When did you last scrub a scalpel?" The Cathara stared blankly. "Of course," Elena sighed. "Superior genetics? Willpower. Why bother with soap when you have intimidating roars and teleportation technology?" She worked non-stop, diagnosing infections, applying dressings, explaining elementary microbiology as if lecturing first-year medical students. She commandeered laboratory space, ordering reluctant Cathara assistants to prepare culture media and antibiotic solutions according to her specifications. "No, you can't chant over the petri dishes," she told one healer firmly. "Contamination protocols exist for a reason." Her sleep schedule disintegrated. She grabbed quick naps between cases, subsisting on Cathara ration bars, surprisingly palatable if you ignored the faint metallic aftertaste, and what passed for caffeine in their nutrient dispensers. One morning, though the concept of morning was largely arbitrary on a space station, Elena emerged from her quarters to find Zdar himself, stationed outside her door. "What are you doing?" she asked, blinking sleep from her eyes. "I guard you," the massive Cathara replied. His scales had regained their luster, the wounds now merely silvery scars across his torso. "I owe you protection. I need coffee and lab time, not a 3-meter sentry." "The life debt must be honored," Zdar insisted. "My service for my survival." Elena opened her mouth to protest further, then closed it. Cathara cultural norms were not something she had time to debate. "Fine, but stand in that corner. You're blocking the corridor." As the days passed, more Cathara joined Zdar. Morak, a pack sub-commander whose sinus infection had nearly reached his brain, organized rotating shifts. Massive Cathara in full battle gear padded the hallways, ensuring no one harmed Elena or interrupted her work. "I'm a researcher, not the great protector," she complained when she found 4 elite guards escorting her to the laboratory. "This is excessive." "Respect demands protection," Morak explained, as if to a child. "You have saved 17 pack leaders. The collective owes you service." Elena tried to focus on her work, but the constant Cathara presence made concentration difficult. Worse, they had begun bringing her non-medical problems. "The hunting territories in the Kepler sector are disputed," a scarred pack leader told her one day. "The mineral rights are claimed by both the 7th and 3rd collectives. How would you resolve this?" Elena blinked in confusion. "Why are you asking me about mining rights? I'm a xenobiologist, ask a strategist." "Your counsel saved our lives," the pack leader replied simply. "We trust your judgment." Similar requests multiplied. Elena found herself mediating disputes between Cathara factions, advising on transportation routes, even reviewing architectural plans for a new training facility. Her suggestions, often made absently, while focusing on bacterial cultures, were treated as profound wisdom. Reports filtered in from intelligence networks across the galaxy. The Gorch Empire reported that Elena Vasquez has become de facto regulator of Cathara military decisions. The Galactic Trade Federation quietly rerouted cargo to minimize contamination risk. Per Elena's unwitting advice, pack councils now revolved around her availability. Their decision calendars, hunting schedules, and territorial disputes were adjusted to accommodate Dr. Vasquez's clinic hours. They formed a rudimentary medical directorate, staffed by Cathara healers, all awaiting Elena's guidance. Elena's frustration grew daily. She never wanted political influence, only to fix infections and return to her research. She confronted her own conscience. Was it pride that bothered her? Why did they treat her like a goddess for performing basic medicine? Meanwhile, the wider galaxy reacted with disbelief. The Velti Confederacy dismissed reports as impossible propaganda. Senior Velti medical officers refused to believe that a human could cure apex predators. The Zephyrian Council declared it a ruse to lower our defenses. Primitive species cannot outclass us intellectually. They dispatched diplomatic envoys to investigate, demanding proof-sterile samples, medical logs, before and after scans of Cathara physiology. Here's Gramstein slides, bacterial cultures, antibiotic sensitivity charts. Elena told them wearily. You can take it or reject it. I don't particularly care. Their skepticism fractured as independent analysts confirmed her results. The evidence was irrefutable. Elena Vasquez had cured dozens of Cathara leaders of a condition previously considered fatal. As word spread, the Cathara granted Elena a fully equipped laboratory worthy of a major scientific institute. Cathara researchers fetched supplies, sequenced bacterial genomes under her guidance, and eagerly implemented hand-washing stations throughout their territories. Elena grappled with a growing moral dilemma. Should she continue exerting authority outside her field? Should she restrict herself to medicine, or help these creatures restructure their society? Her conscience won. She would limit her involvement to health and simple logistical advice. When asked about territorial disputes, she redirected them to their own councils. When questioned about military strategy, she reminded them that she was a doctor, not a tactician. Still, her influence expanded. Cathara fleets altered patrol routes based on her casual observations about efficiency. Trade agreements were restructured when she mentioned resource allocation. Hunting quotas changed after she commented on sustainable practices. The climax came during a formal ceremony. Via holoconference, the Cathara Emperora figure so rarely seen that many believed him mythical addressed the assembled pack leaders. All Cathara hunting expeditions will include human-style medical contingencies, the Emperor decreed. Dr. Elena Vasquez is henceforth acknowledged as Savior of the Apex, first among healers, Commander of the Invisible. Elena stood in the grand ceremonial chamber as pack leaders bowed. Embarrassed, she nosedived headfirst into her microscope to avoid eye contact. I'm a biologist, not your overlord seriously. The Cathara interpreted her humility as further proof of her uniquely superior wisdom. In the months that followed, Cathara society transformed. Basic sanitation protocols were adopted throughout their territories. Traditional healers learned aseptic technique. Medical councils were institutionalized within pack hierarchies. Most significantly, tribute flows shifted from exotic metals to pharmaceutical supplies. The Cathara paid humans to produce antibiotics rather than demanding precious resources from subjugated worlds. Elena received invitations to address galactic health summits, which she declined, preferring her laboratory. She still spent late nights tinkering with xenobiology experiments, sometimes with a dozen Cathara scribes in attendance, taking notes on her most mundane observations. Trade lanes reopened across the 17 star systems as Cathara fleets focused inward on medical reform rather than outward on conquest. Worlds no longer paid tribute, lest their cargo be subject to Elena's contamination checks. Cathara generals consulted her on logistical efficiency rather than raw intimidation. The Gorch Empire quietly adopted medical protocols. The Velti Confederacy established an interspecies research grant named the Vasquez Fund. Late one evening, aboard her new off-world laboratory station, Elena examined a petri dish containing extremophile bacteria from Gavan Prime descendants of the culture that had once escaped toward her ship's ventilation system. Through the observation window, she could see a Cathara guard standing sentinel, outside fully at ease, scales gleaming under the corridor lights. Zatar had finally been convinced to return to his duties, but insisted that Elena always have protection. "I never asked for this," she murmured to the microbes under her microscope. "I just wanted to cure an infection. Yet my little microscope changed the galaxy." She made a note in her research log, then leaned back in her chair. The irony wasn't lost on her. After centuries of fearing the Cathara, the galaxy had been reshaped not by warships or weapons, but by hand-washing and antibiotics. "It turns out," she told the silent laboratory, "that sometimes wiping a finger across a slide can be more powerful than sending fleets of warships." Outside, the stars continued their ancient trajectories, indifferent to the political reshuffling of sentient species. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a Cathara healer was explaining germ theory to a skeptical pack leader. Somewhere else, a Velti doctor was replicating Elena's treatment protocols. And in her laboratory, Dr. Elena Vasquez returned to her microscope, where the invisible world, the true rulers of the universe, awaited her attention.